First on our agenda, HB 327 Energy Tax Credit Amendments. Representative Peterson.
Okay, thank you. So this presentation will be fairly short. I don't have an elaborate presentation ready for the committee this morning, but what I do have is a couple of philosophical questions to ask and some things for us to consider as a committee. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is the proper role of government in using tax policy to encourage industry? I think sometimes we are faced with political decisions. Sometimes there are things that are deemed popular or unpopular, and that has an impact on the decisions that we make up here regarding how we use our tax policy to affect industries that are regarded as desirable or undesirable at the moment. Another question I would ask is when government embarks on subsidizing an industry that is deemed desirable, how does it know when the appropriate time is to disembark from those subsidies? That's a question that we would like to answer, and how do we determine where that point is? Oftentimes, when we provide subsidies for any industry, the industry builds that subsidy into their business model, and it becomes part of the bottom line that they need to operate. And so these are some considerations that have come up, not just with the bill, the industry that's addressed in this bill, the solar industry, but with a lot of industries that we encourage through the use of our tax policy. So just a little backstory. Over the summer, I got criticized in our Senate Rev and Tax Committee for spending too much of my summer months studying tax credits, which was probably just criticism. But I spent some time digging into our tax credit code and exploring what was happening with the use of our tax credits. And this was one that, this solar tax credit was one that I identified that seemed to be growing, and there seemed to be evidence that the industry was maturing and gathering acceptance in the broader market. And so I thought we'd bring some attention to this. In meeting with stakeholders, it became apparent that they felt some dark clouds were gathering around the solar industry with this bill, and so there was some debate on the means and methods and timing of withdrawing government support from the industry. So with that, I'm not going to ask the committee to move this bill out today. I'm going to ask that we send it to rules, and we'll put this on the interim study agenda so we can work with stakeholders and answer some of these questions about when is the proper time to withdraw government support, how do we determine that through the involvement of the stakeholders, and is it possible to come to a conclusion or come to that determination working together. So with that, I'll turn the time over to anyone. Well, I'll turn the time back over. That's my presentation, Chair.
Thank you. We come back to the committee for clarifying questions. We've got several lights on. First, Representative Sagers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer your question, Jeremy, I could look at this from a business perspective. I think you can measure anything, the value of anything that we do. And I do it oftentimes in a number of various odd ways. You can do a cost-benefit analysis. Let me give you a couple of examples. I was in a meeting this morning where GOED had allowed $80 million in credits over a 5-year period to induce a business to come into the state. A lot of money. But if you measure it, the return for that was $300 million in new tax revenues to the state over the same period of time. My math tells me that's a net revenue of $220 million, which is pretty darn good. Refineries came up today. There's a bill offering huge incentives to refineries. And the question was, why? It seemed like a very good question until you drill down a little bit and realize that these refineries are not required, because of their size, under federal regulations, to go to Tier 3 fuels. And so if you look at it from that perspective, the impact that will have on air quality is huge. I think UDOT projected over, I think it was a 10 or 12-year period, as older cars come off the road, as Tier 3 fuels are implemented, we reduce air quality pollution from vehicles by 40 or 50%. And so again, you can measure that return on investment for those tax incentives as what it would cost in health, and and what it would cost us as a state to clean that up ourselves to reduce that air quality. And so things can be measured. I think it's what we have to look at is what is the investment and what's going to be the return on the investment.
Well, if I can speak to that, I agree. I think things can be measured. I think a lot of times this body doesn't understand what those measurements are, or have them presented to them. Also, something to consider too is at what point will the market do things on its own without that inducement provided by the taxpayers? Like, for instance, with the Tier 3, that may occur on its own, maybe, at some point. The question is, are we shifting that forward in time, or are we getting 6 months, a 6-month shift? Is it a 3-year shift? And again, these shifts in time that are created by incentives that we provide are is that best policy? I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
You may.
Thank you. I'd simply say this, let's take Tier 3 fuels for an example. Right now, because of the size of the refineries, they're exempted from the federal mandate. And so there's no incentive for them to do anything at all. They're going to keep on doing what they're doing. Well, could that change? Possibly, but I doubt it. If you look at the Congress, I don't think it'll pass legislation like that. I don't think a new president would regulate that. And so again, you have to make some assumptions on any investment.
Right.
And anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ivory.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I appreciate you asking the question. This is important. I think in some areas they're loving solar and renewable technologies to their detriment, and to ask that question I think is critical. In California, they've gone so far with incentives and they've had such an uptake on solar that they're having to figure out how to pay people to take electrons during the peak sun times and then still have base load to take electricity back in other times. And so you have this distortion in the power provision versus the power demand. And so I appreciate you asking the question. I wonder if you've seen other unintended consequences of pushing out, trying to pick winners and losers in the market from a government standpoint.
Well, I think we do that every year. We could just watch on the House floor, and I'm sure we'll find a few. But again, I'm not trying to disparage the fact that it happens, because sometimes it's appropriate. But the question is, once you've done that, there's a dependency that occurs, and without damaging that industry, beyond repair, how does somebody withdraw that support or wean an industry from government subsistence, so to speak, or support? It's a difficult question.
And I think, to be clear, all of the above, let the best technologies flourish and thrive and develop in that great American entrepreneurial way. Absolutely agree. But obviously you get more of what you incentivize, and sometimes to your detriment. So I really appreciate you asking the question. I look forward to examining this in greater detail.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Cunningham.
I was just going to give Jeremy his wishes and say move back to rules.
Well, and there may be some folks that are here to testify. I'm not sure if they're here
We'll
this morning,
get to that in the
Okay, so
action
when it's ready.
portion. Thank you. Representative Briscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Temporary Chair, whatever you are up there.
Deputy.
Deputy Chair.
Chair Pro
Ooh,
Tem.
Does that come with a badge? He'd look good with a badge.
You're just
Or
envious.
Cowboy hat. I am.
Canadian Mountie hat with a...
I am envious. Representative Peterson, I appreciate you bringing this issue before us, and I've done that before, bring an issue to a committee and said, send this right to the summer where we can study it. And I appreciate your sensitivity to the issue and the appropriate use of government policy to destroy or enable or push. I'm looking at a headline, International Monetary Fund, energy subsidies in 2015 projected at U.S. dollars $5.3 trillion, or 6.5% of global GDP. If we're going to look at energy subsidies, let's look at all energy subsidies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I see no additional lights, so let's go to the public comment portion of the bill presentation. Is there anyone from the public who's here to comment on this bill today? I see no hands.
Oh, all right.
So we will bring it back to the committee for action or Representative Notwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd make a motion that we lift this bill from our committee, send it to rules, and recommend it for interim study. House Bill 327, Energy Tax Credit Amendments.
Thank you. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll move to the bill sponsor.
Look forward to having a robust discussion this summer with you and the stakeholders.
All right, we'll have a, oh yeah, thank you. Back to the maker of the motion for some.
I'll waive.
All right, we'll have a roll call vote. That's our practice here in Rev and Tax. Oh, sorry. Guess you need that, Ann.
Thank you. Representative Stannard? Yes. Sagers? Yes. McKell? Yes. Notwell? Yes. King?
Yes.
Ivory? Yes. Cunningham? Yes. Briscoe? Peterson?
Yes.
Thank you. Voting in 8-0 and unanimous. 9-0, sorry. All right, I shall turn the helm of the good ship Rev and Tax back to our good Vice Chair.